I promise I will always protect you.
Thank you, I know you will.
Doña.
You can't make promises you can't keep.
The cowboy thought he would never see the two giant Apache sisters again after risking his life to save them from a deadly attack. But before sunrise the next morning, a loud knock echoed through his lonely cabin. When he opened the door, the sisters were standing there silent, determined, and carrying something that made his heart stop. What they did next would change his life forever. The sun hung low over the Arizona frontier, casting long shadows across the dusty ground. A lone cowboy named Ethan Cole guided his horse along a narrow trail that wound between rocky hills and dry brush. He was a tall man with weathered hands and a quiet nature. Most people in the nearby town knew him as someone who worked hard, spoke little, and kept to himself. Years earlier, Ethan had lost his wife and young son to a fever that swept through the territory. Since then, he had chosen a life of solitude on a small ranch far from the noise of town. His days were simple. He cared for his cattle, repaired fences, and spent long evenings watching the sky change colors over the desert. That afternoon, he was returning from a trading post when something unusual caught his attention. A faint cry echoed through the canyon ahead. Ethan pulled gently on the reins and listened. There it was again. Not the sound of an animal. A person. He urged his horse forward. As he rounded a bend, the scene before him made him stop. Two young Apache women were running along the canyon floor. They were taller than most people Ethan had ever seen, strong and athletic, moving swiftly despite the rough ground beneath their feet. Behind them rode 6 armed men. The riders shouted as they chased the women through the canyon. Dust rose beneath the pounding hooves. One of the men raised a rifle. Without thinking, Ethan guided his horse down the slope. The women spotted him but continued running. The riders noticed him too. One of them laughed. "Move aside, cowboy. This is none of your business." Ethan studied their faces. There was something wrong in their eyes. They were not lawmen. They were hunters chasing prey. "What did they do?" Ethan asked. The rider sneered. "Nothing you need to worry about." That answer was enough. Ethan rested a hand near his revolver. "If they have done no wrong, then leave them be." The men exchanged glances. Then one reached for his weapon. Everything happened at once. Ethan drew first. A gunshot echoed through the canyon. His bullet struck the rider's arm, sending the rifle tumbling into the dirt. The other men charged. The canyon exploded into chaos. Ethan fired again while steering his horse behind a large rock. Bullets struck stone around him. The 2 Apache women did not run. Instead, they turned and joined the fight. One grabbed a fallen rifle while the other climbed a rocky ledge with surprising speed. Their courage caught the attackers off guard. Within minutes, the advantage shifted. Realizing they were losing, the riders retreated down the canyon, shouting threats as they disappeared into the distance. Silence slowly returned. Ethan climbed from behind the rocks and checked his horse. The 2 women approached cautiously. Up close, he could see the determination in their eyes. One of them spoke softly. "You helped us." Ethan nodded. "You would have done the same." For a moment, none of them spoke. Then the sisters exchanged a glance. The older one offered a quiet word of thanks before both turned toward the hills. Before Ethan could ask their names, they disappeared among the rocks. He watched until they were gone. As evening settled over the desert, Ethan continued home. He believed the strange encounter had ended. He had no way of knowing that before sunrise, those same sisters would arrive at his cabin carrying a secret that would change his life forever. Ethan slept lightly that night. The events in the canyon stayed in his mind long after darkness settled across the ranch. He kept seeing the faces of the 2 Apache sisters and wondering why armed men had been chasing them. Something about the encounter felt unfinished. Outside, the desert was quiet. The stars shone brightly above the open land, and a cool breeze drifted through the cottonwood trees near the creek. Just before dawn, a loud knock shattered the silence. Ethan sat upright in bed. For a moment he thought he had imagined it. Then came another knock, even louder than before. He reached for the rifle leaning against the wall and moved carefully toward the front door. The sky outside was still dark blue, with only the first hint of morning appearing along the horizon. Another knock echoed through the cabin. Ethan opened the door. Standing in the pale morning light were the two Apache sisters. They looked exhausted. Dust covered their clothing, and both carried signs of a long night without rest. But what caught Ethan's attention was the bundle wrapped tightly in a thick blanket. The older sister held it close against her chest. "You came a long way," Ethan said. The women exchanged a glance. "We need help," the younger sister replied. Ethan stepped aside. "Come in." The sisters entered the cabin. As soon as they crossed the doorway, Ethan noticed movement inside the bundle. His eyes widened. A child. The older sister slowly pulled back part of the blanket. A small boy stared up at him. He could not have been older than 4 years. His dark eyes were tired and frightened. The child clung tightly to the woman holding him. Ethan lowered his rifle. What happened? The sisters sat near the fireplace while the boy remained wrapped in the blanket. For several moments, neither woman spoke. Finally, the older sister broke the silence. "His name is Daniel." Ethan listened carefully. The story that followed explained everything. 3 nights earlier, a group of armed raiders had attacked a small Apache settlement hidden in the hills. Several families had lived there peacefully for years. The attack came without warning. Homes were burned. People were killed. The survivors scattered into the wilderness. Daniel's parents had died protecting him. The sisters had managed to escape with the boy before the attackers could find him. Ethan looked at the child. The boy stared silently into the fire. "Why are they still chasing him?" Ethan asked. The younger sister shifted uneasily. "Because of his father." Ethan frowned. "What about him?" The sisters hesitated. It was clear they did not fully trust anyone outside their people. At last, the older sister answered. "Before he died, Daniel's father guarded something important." "What was it?" "A secret." The room fell silent again. The crackling fire filled the space between them. Ethan folded his arms. "That secret must be valuable if men are willing to kill for it." The sisters nodded. "Very valuable." Ethan could see fear in their eyes for the first time. Not fear for themselves. Fear for the child. The older sister looked directly at him. "We cannot protect him alone." Ethan was surprised. "Why come to me? You saved strangers yesterday." The younger sister continued. "You stood against 6 armed men without knowing who we were." Ethan had no answer. The sisters had a point. Most people would have ridden away. The older sister placed a hand on the child's shoulder. "We need someone we can trust." Ethan looked at the frightened boy. He remembered his own son. The memory struck him harder than he expected. For years he had avoided thinking about the family he lost. Now those memories returned all at once. He walked to the window and stared into the growing light outside. Helping them would bring danger. He knew that. The men from the canyon would return. Perhaps more would come. His peaceful life could disappear overnight. Yet when he glanced back at the child, the decision became easier. Finally, Ethan nodded. "You can stay here for now." Relief spread across both sisters' faces. The younger woman smiled for the first time. "Thank you." The morning passed quietly. The sisters rested while Ethan prepared food. Daniel remained close to them, speaking only a few words. By afternoon, the ranch seemed peaceful once again. But as Ethan repaired a fence near the edge of his property, something caught his eye. A flash of movement on a distant ridge. He turned quickly. A rider stood on the hill overlooking the ranch. Watching. The figure remained motionless for several seconds before turning away and disappearing beyond the horizon. Ethan's stomach tightened. The men who wanted the child had found them. And he feared this was only the beginning. Ethan did not mention the rider immediately. That evening, he watched the hills from the porch while the sisters prepared supper inside the cabin. The memory of the distant figure stayed with him. Whoever had been watching the ranch had not been lost or passing through. The rider had been observing the property. Waiting. After darkness fell, Ethan finally shared what he had seen. The sisters exchanged worried looks. "They found us sooner than we expected," the older sister said. "We should leave before sunrise," the younger sister added. Ethan nodded. He had already reached the same conclusion. If danger was coming, he did not want it arriving at his front door. Before dawn the next morning, they packed supplies and quietly left the ranch. Ethan loaded food, blankets, and water onto 2 horses. Daniel rode in front of him, wrapped in a warm coat against the morning chill. For most of the day, they traveled through remote country far from established trails. The sisters knew the land well. They guided the group through narrow valleys and hidden paths that few outsiders would recognize. By afternoon, they reached a shallow river. As the horses crossed the water, Daniel pointed toward the far bank. "People." Ethan followed the child's gaze. 3 riders appeared among the trees. The pursuers had caught up again. Without hesitation, Ethan urged his horse forward. The sisters did the same. The group crossed the river just as the riders entered the water behind them. For the next hour, they pushed hard across rough ground until the pursuers finally disappeared from sight. That night, they camped beneath a cluster of tall rocks. Daniel slept quickly from exhaustion. Ethan sat beside the fire while the sisters kept watch. For the first time since leaving the ranch, the older sister began explaining the truth. Years earlier, their father had protected a piece of land hidden deep within the mountains. The valley contained fresh water, fertile soil, and enough grazing land to support many families. As drought spread across parts of the territory, wealthy ranch owners became desperate to control every reliable source of water. Some men learned about the hidden valley. They wanted it for themselves. "But they never found it," Ethan said. The older sister nodded. "Our father made sure of that." Before his death, the location had been divided into several clues. No single person knew everything. Daniel's father had been entrusted with the final piece. That was why he had been killed. And that was why Daniel remained in danger. The next morning, the journey continued. The mountains grew steeper. The trails became narrower. By late afternoon, Ethan sensed trouble. The land around them had become too quiet. No birds. No movement. Nothing. Then a rifle shot shattered the silence. A bullet struck the ground near Ethan's horse. More shots followed. Riders appeared on both sides of the trail. An ambush. Ethan quickly pulled Daniel behind a large rock while the sisters returned fire. Dust filled the air. The sound of gunshots echoed across the canyon walls. For several tense minutes, neither side gained an advantage. Then Ethan heard a cry. He turned. The younger sister had been surrounded by 2 attackers. She fought fiercely, but the numbers were against her. One of the men grabbed her horse and forced her away from the trail. "Ethan!" the older sister shouted. The attackers began retreating. Within moments, they disappeared into the canyon with their captive. Silence returned as suddenly as it had vanished. Ethan stood frozen, breathing heavily. Daniel clung to his arm. The older sister stared toward the distant cliffs where the riders had escaped. Fear and determination filled her eyes. They took her. Ethan looked toward the fading dust cloud on the horizon. The chase was no longer about survival. Now it had become a rescue. And somewhere ahead, the people hunting Daniel were preparing for whatever came next. The sun was setting when Ethan, Daniel, and the older sister reached the edge of a narrow canyon. The tracks left by the kidnappers were easy to follow. They led toward an abandoned mining camp that had been deserted for years. From a distance, Ethan could see several horses tied near the old buildings. Smoke rose from a campfire in the center of the settlement. The kidnappers had stopped for the night. Ethan studied the area carefully. "We go in after dark," he said. The older sister agreed. They waited until night covered the canyon in shadow. Then they moved quietly between the crumbling structures. Daniel remained hidden in a small cave nearby while Ethan and the sister approached the camp. Voices drifted through the darkness. The men were talking openly, believing nobody could hear them. Ethan crouched behind a broken wall and listened. What he heard changed everything. The men were working for a powerful ranch owner named Victor Hale. For years, Hale had been buying land throughout the territory. Whenever families refused to sell, trouble seemed to follow. Crops were destroyed. Livestock disappeared. Threats were made. Many people eventually abandoned their homes. The hidden valley was the final piece Hale wanted. Control of its water would make him one of the wealthiest men in the region. The kidnappers laughed as they discussed their employer's plans. One man even admitted that several Apache settlements had been attacked on Hale's orders. The older sister clenched her fists. Her eyes filled with anger. The attacks that destroyed families and drove people from their homes had not been random. They had been part of a larger plan. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. "First, we get your sister out." She nodded. Moments later, they located the younger sister inside a wooden storage building. Her hands were tied, but she was unharmed. Ethan quietly removed the ropes. The reunion was brief. There was no time for celebration. Before leaving, they searched the camp and discovered something unexpected. Inside one of the buildings sat a locked chest filled with documents. Land records, signed agreements, letters, proof of bribery, proof of threats, proof of illegal land seizures. Enough evidence to expose Victor Hale's entire operation. Ethan gathered every document he could carry. "This is what we need," he said. "If people see this, they will know the truth." The group slipped away from the camp before dawn. But their escape did not go unnoticed. As they reached a ridge overlooking the mountains, riders appeared behind them. Dozens of them. Victor Hale had learned about the rescue. And now he was coming personally. Far ahead, beyond the mountains, lay the hidden valley. The one place the enemies had spent years searching for. The one place Daniel's father had died protecting. Ethan looked at the approaching riders and then toward the distant horizon. The final battle was waiting there. And by the next sunset, the future of the valley would be decided once and for all. By midday, Ethan, the sisters, and Daniel reached the hidden valley. The sight before them was breathtaking. A clear river wound through rich green grass. Tall trees lined the water's edge, and fertile land stretched across the valley floor. After weeks of danger and hardship, they finally understood why so many people had fought to protect it. But there was little time to admire it. Victor Hale and his riders soon appeared at the entrance to the valley. The final confrontation had begun. Hale demanded that Ethan hand over Daniel and the documents. Ethan refused. What followed was a fierce battle across the valley. The sisters fought with courage and skill, defending the child and the evidence that could expose Hale's crimes. Ethan and a handful of settlers who had secretly followed the trail stood beside them. As the struggle continued, Hale's own men began to lose faith in him. When the documents were revealed, the truth could no longer be hidden. Many riders lowered their weapons. Some abandoned Hale entirely. Realizing he had lost control, Hale attempted to flee. He was quickly captured and brought to justice along with the men who had carried out his orders. In the months that followed, the hidden valley became a refuge for families who had been driven from their homes. New houses were built. Crops were planted. Children played freely along the riverbanks. Daniel finally had a safe place to grow up. One evening, Ethan stood overlooking the valley as the sun dipped below the mountains. The two sisters joined him. For the first time in many years, he no longer felt alone. He had thought he was rescuing strangers when he stepped into that canyon. Instead, they had given him something he believed he had lost forever. A family. And a place to call home. And so, what began as a simple act of courage on a lonely canyon trail became something far greater. A cowboy who had spent years carrying the weight of loss found a new purpose. Two Apache sisters who had lost so much found justice. And a young boy who had nearly lost everything found a future filled with hope. The hidden valley became a symbol of resilience, proving that kindness can change lives in ways we never expect. Sometimes, the people we save end up saving us in return. As the sun set over the valley each evening, Ethan looked around at the families, the laughter, and the life that had returned to the land. For the first time in many years, he knew he was exactly where he belonged. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful Western stories filled with courage, mystery, and unforgettable human connections. Leave a comment below and tell us, what would you have done if two strangers had appeared at your door before dawn asking for help? And if you enjoyed this story, share it with friends and family so more people can experience this incredible journey of loyalty, sacrifice, and hope. Until next time, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.